So thank you very much. Listen, I'm really grateful to have this opportunity to talk and mindful that it may be that people that need to listen most aren't actually with us right this second because they're still knee deep cleaning everything out of the house, the practice, trying to deal with the kids, trying to deal with the banks and the finances. My story was being a practice owner. Deliberately choosing to open a practice near where I lived, which is on a beautiful lake, in a place that the council said, "Oh yes, that's safe. That's the 100-year flood level on the ground level," and so we built above that. And I thought, "Oh yeah, that's safe. That's a good decision to make." And then when I got insurance for my practice, I said, "Give me the best that you've got. I want the gold cover, everything that you've got." And then I got emailed a package, and they said, "Yep, this is the best that we've got." And then I signed it. And so, with the Townsville floods that occurred on the 19th, back in 2019, we had seen the waters rise, but we weren't part of the area that was supposed to flood. And then we got a rude shock when all of a sudden all the plans changed, which has certainly been the experience for most of you down south, where it did come as a bit of a shock. Like you, the first few days are very much focused on the emergent needs, electricity, food, children, safety, health, all of those aspects, and then considering those ones around you. And I'm particularly, horrified to hear of the deaths that are still only being discovered now at this time, after even these many days after the floods. So the community is just going to be reeling. And then I made the call to the insurance company, who said, "Oh, didn't you know your policy didn't cover flood?" Which essentially for me led to a year-long battle, where I eventually went through the ombudsman, who did rule in my favour, and we did get some bit of a payout, but certainly not enough. So I've been there, and I guess I just wanted to give you a little bit of my experience and top tips. The first thing I'd say is it's all about the cash. It's all about cash flow and money, and that's where things like the RDAQ grant really did make a big difference. In fact, it was an RDAQ person who called me first and offered me assistance, financial assistance, and my first reaction was, no, I'm independent. I'm a smart person. I should be fine. I should be able to cope with this. And they called again, and I said yes, and I really did need it. And I think that was part of me learning to stop being the person that could manage everything and could cope, and actually start asking for help. And that was actually quite a big personality change for me. And not only had I learnt that I was vulnerable, which I didn't feel so vulnerable until the day of the flood, but I actually learnt that it is okay to say yes sometimes, and that people genuinely do want to help. So please do say yes. One of the lessons that I learnt was that some of the people that I said no to early on didn't keep coming back and asking if I needed help. They sort of assumed that because I said no in the first few days, that it meant that I meant no forever, whereas in fact, I didn't really realise all my needs in the first week. I didn't realise all my needs in the first month. In fact, a couple of months later, I remember thinking, oh, actually, that person that called me within the first 3 days, I did actually need their help, and I really need it now. And so I called them back. Sadly, sometimes they'd already gone on to other things, so that offer of help was no longer valid. So I guess one of the tips I'd give is that take a record of those that are deliberately calling you up and contacting you saying, "Do you need anything?" Sometimes they're calling up out of love, and they say, "Just tell me what you need and I'll do it." When it's an open-ended question like that, that can be quite confronting for you to know how to answer that when they've left it so open-ended. Sometimes if you're receiving an offer of help and they're quite specific, do you want some food? Do you want me to cook some meals? Do you want some help sweeping out the mud? Do you want some help with demolition? Do you want some help looking after the kids for a couple of days so that you can focus on the rebuild? Those kinds of specific offers of help are very useful. And so get used to actually replying, yes, I would like some help. I don't know what that is right now, but is it all right if I call you back? Is a really easy way of saying thank you. I don't know the answer right now, but I appreciate it and I'll get back to you. And perhaps start keeping a list of these people that are offering help, because you never know when it'll come. Once I was assured that my family was safe and all of their needs were met, then I went into full, business mode, which is where many of you are already. And certainly looking at the Facebook and media posts, some of you are already talking about rebuilding parts of your practice, identifying other locations. Well done. You really need to think outside the box. You've got to ask yourself, do you want to reopen? I know certainly there was practices near me that didn't reopen, some businesses and some general practices that actually used the flood as I guess, a catalyst for the decision not to reopen at all. And in fact, I can say quite openly now that I'm better off financially now than I was before the floods, because some of my competitors nearby decided not to reopen, and I got their doctors and their patients. So, sometimes long term down the track, there can be other benefits. So it may be that you're thinking about reopening, and you're thinking about not, maybe perhaps actually taking this as an opportunity to retire or maybe do something else. And I think be honest with yourself, have those discussions. I certainly caught up my accountant and said, what does bankruptcy look like? Because for the early phases, I didn't have the guarantee of insurance. And so I just said to my accountant, let's talk through bankruptcy, because I feel like I'm there. So needing to have those discussions early is important. With yourself and your partners and your business partners to see whether you should rebuild. In terms of finances, when you talk to the government about what help is there, say, yes, we're giving help. There's all of these grants and there's all of these business plans, but it's all about timing. It takes time for the government to get these grants out. There was a wonderful grant that came out probably a month after the floods, $50,000, which I needed. But of course, the 20 bits of paperwork that I needed to submit also included a bit of paper that said, you need to show us that the insurer isn't going to cover this. If we're going to give you the 50,000, you've got to tell us that the insurer won't. And I said, well, actually, the insurers told me they're going to take 6 months to give me a determination. So how can I tell you, I need this money now because I wanted to pay my staff their salaries. But the government process just took too long. So keep an eye out for all the grants. Keep Googling. Sometimes I just stumbled across grants that were out there in a newspaper article. So keep talking to each other and find out what the opportunities are, and apply for them, because there will be plenty. But be mindful that they're going to take time and they're going to take paperwork. And there's a million questions because they're government grants. So if you need a business savvy person to help you, ask. When people call up and ask for help, if you know that they've got accounting backgrounds or financial, or if they're a practice owner and they can help you with the paperwork, that's one of the people that you might call back and say, actually, can you help me with this application? In terms of financial recovery, which is probably where many of you are thinking right now, the single bit of advice that I can give you is it's all through the banks. The banks want to look good in this. The banks don't want to anything in the press at all about them, cancelling your mortgage or, trying to pull out the rug from under you. The banks don't want to be in the paper with you saying, I went to Westpac for help and they said no. In fact, it's the exact opposite. They want to do everything they can. Call up your banks, even for your personal accounts, say, I've been affected by the floods. Can I please pause my mortgage for 3 or 6 months? Can I please pause my credit card or loan repayments for 3 to 6 months? It's almost done over the phone in a second. I can't tell you how much it is, how much extra cash it is in your pocket when you're not paying those bills every month. Don't worry, they'll get you back with interest down the track, but at least you've got time. The other thing was that the lenders, and sometimes the small lenders, and I won't mention the particular bank that supported me because I don't want this to sound like an advertorial, but I was with one of the smaller lenders that helps new medical practices that focus on medicine. They flew up their manager, who put the gumboots on and walked through my practice with you, and turned and said to me, Michael, whatever you need, we're going to give you. We want to make sure we look after you on all this. And I said, well, I think I need to work. I think I need to rebuild from scratch. I think I'm going to need all of that money all over again. I think I need 400,000. And he said, done. And I thought, oh. I said, well, I don't have anything to show for it at the moment in terms of paperwork. He said, don't worry. And it was done. And I can't tell you what that meant for me. And it just sort of opened up these avenues of, okay, maybe I can get through this. Maybe I will get through this. And we certainly did. And I have to say, it wasn't through government grants that really rescued us, even though that certainly helped. It was certainly through the banks. So do realise that the banks actually do want to support you. They want to make good. And so use them. And if you get the wrong answer from your bank, escalate, or maybe even talk to the other ones. In terms of other people to involve, in terms of agencies, I ended up needing to use the insurance ombudsman, and I think I didn't know about that as an option early on, but certainly be aware that there is an ombudsman. Think of them like APRA for doctors. There's an ombudsman that overlooks all of these insurance agencies and the banks. And if you think that you've been hard done by, or a decision's been made against you, and it doesn't seem right to you, call the Ombudsman. It's free for you. Write a letter. I did, and after 6 months, I had a decision in my favour, and another 3 months after that, I had cash in the bank because I raised a complaint to the Ombudsman about the way that I felt that I was managed by the insurer. So there are those opportunities. So there are insurance ombudsmen, there are, and the Ombudsman also covers the banks as well. You might find that you need to use them. The other thing that I regret that I didn't do, that I really want to make sure I remember to say, is consider using some of these claims agents. Now, one of the things that scared me most after the floods was the fact that everybody seemed to want to make money out of me, even in disaster. Back when I could get into my shopping centre on the first day, I was dressed up like a tradie. I had big boots on. I looked like a tradie. I was scruffy. My hair was everywhere. And I hopped out of my car, and a whole lot of other tradies jumped out of their boots at the same time because the doors were being opened for the first time. And there I was walking with these tradies, and three of them said to each other, "This is fantastic. This is going to be so good for us. We're going to make so much money out of all this." And then the friend of mine that was with me said, "Hey, not everybody's going to make money out of this," and pointed to me. So they sort of shut up shop. One thing that really frustrated me was the fact that all of a sudden everything went up in price. Builders started charging more because it's harder. Everybody wanted to fit a foot in the pie. Somebody wanted to pay to assess the bacterial load in my practice and decided that I had to pay extra to grind the concrete just in case bacteria got caught in the concrete. It just felt like I had to be on the defence every step of the way through, that there are always people after my money. So it's a really sad part of the floods, which reminds me, just remember, whatever the builder tells you in terms of how long it's going to take to rebuild, double it. Certainly with the amount of damage and devastation you've got down south right now, it's going to take a year to 18 months. I live in Idalia, where we flooded. It's probably 2 years after the floods before the last house was finally finished. It just takes time to get through all those things. Getting back to the claims agents, I made my own submissions, both for my own house and the bits of the business I could claim myself. In hindsight, there were things that I could have asked for if I knew how to play the game. And some of my friends and colleagues that used claims agents, and you just have to Google claims agents or help me with my insurance claim. And I'm not going to name anybody in particular because I didn't end up using any of them. But I wish I had, because it turns out that my friends that knew which buttons to push and, things that they could ask for that I didn't think to ask for actually got more money than I did. So I think there can be a benefit in actually using a claims agent. So do think about that. This is their full-time business. It's to come in and try and think about how to maximise the insurance payouts. So please think about that. So hopefully I've covered off on a little bit of the finance. The next thing I'm going to say is more that 1 year long-term plan. That one of the strongest things that occurs in the community is their recognition of you as their GP, as the real centre point of recovery. You're going to have people come in and see you for. There's someone at the door. Okay, can somebody else talk to them? I can't. Sorry. I had a very polite daughter tell me there's somebody at the door. You become the centre point of where people can come and debrief. Remember, nobody wants to debrief and have a whinge because they always think about somebody next door that's worse off. They don't really like to go in and talk in a public forum at the cafe about how sad they are because everybody else around them's sad. But in the GP clinic with you, that's their safe place. And they're allowed to be sad with you, and you're allowed to tell them they're allowed to be sad and grieving. So my first, for the whole year of consulting, it was just people just needing to vent. I mean, they said that they were there for a repeat script, but I know that's not why they were there. They just needed to be heard. For too many of the people, it's a private grief. With the floods, people like me that felt guilty. I felt guilty that I didn't have insurance. I felt that was a bad business decision, and so I felt guilty about that and didn't want to talk about it. But your patients are going to feel guilty. So after 6 months, I realised that so much of my work became mental health by default that I actually went and did some extra training. So I did the Focus Psychological Skills training courses online because every patient I was dealing with was suffering trauma, and doing that extra training equipped me to deal with that better. So outcome, because I do need to wrap up. Outcome, listen, I never want to go through it again, and if it happens again, I'm leaving. I've only got one flood in me at this location, but now I can look back on it and think about what it gave me in terms of strength and growing and community connection. I've certainly learned a lot about business and about human nature. My practice's connection to the community is now stronger than ever, and my life as a GP really changed. And I tell the story. I've told this before to another forum, but I was really worried about going back to general practice for the first day because I didn't know how well equipped I'd be to deal with their concerns about their sore knee or their depression or their dementia or their worries when I was still quite overwhelmed by my own. And my staff said, "Oh, listen, you're fully booked for the first 2 days. You know, everybody was out waiting till you could get back, and then they've lined you up." And I looked, and you know, some of them were my most complex patients. The first 2 days weren't about them. They all came in to check on me. "How are you doing, Michael? We saw what's going on. We're just here to check on you. Here's some chocolate." They always knew my favourite chocolate or wine in some cases. But in fact, that was the first time I really felt the community and what it did for me, which I wasn't expecting. I think it's important to get a group of people around you that you trust for advice and keep them on tap. For me, I had a couple of very close friends and supports, Nicole and Bruce from the RSCG faculty, who came to town in the midst of all of it just to sit with me and my wife Shannon, take us out to dinner and just listen, and just so that I could call them up on my good days and call them up on my bad days, and they knew what was going on. Todd Cameron was also a good support to me during this. Some of you know him. He's a business owner with good credentials, so we actually set up a regular telephone catch up and a little Facebook chat group where I could just say, "Oh, what do I do about," well, for example, one of my issues was my registrars. I had registrars and I didn't want to have to keep paying for them, and I didn't have a training environment for them. So, you know, just one of the issues was just calling up the JCU GP training saying you need to find somewhere else for them. I can't, you know, make good on my contract. So just, you know, millions of these decisions, but just having other people to bounce these, you know, that think about all these other things. I'll admit I was a little bit dirty because I donated these registrars out, and then 4, 5, 6 months later, whenever it was that I was actually able to reopen the doors again, I said, "I want them back." And I was told by them, "No, you can't have them back. We've placed them now. They'll stay there." And I said, "Do you have any more?" "Oh, no, we don't have anybody for you." I went, "Oh, okay, that's lovely." I really did need doctors at the time. So brains trust, people that you trust. I'm happy to join if you think I can help. But you want to find a mix of people that have a little bit of lived experience is good, but also just some of that business sense. And I know everybody around this room would certainly be happy to do that. But you just need somebody to help share some of that decision-making fatigue, that just feeling of exhaustion that happens at the end of the day when you feel like you've used up all your brain cells, deciding what to do about the littlest of things. You know, one of the traumas that we faced well after the cleanup was a particular patient had given us paper records, very, very important paper records that were relevant for their immigration application and their only copy of XYZ. And I said to my staff, "Why did we even hold them? Like, we're an electronic practice." We had offsite, you know, backups, which is good for everything. So I wasn't worried about my electronic, but so why did we have this? And then, of course, so we had a formal complaint from the patient who lost their, you know, only copy of whatever it was because it was all, you know, muddy and we had to throw it out. As Bruce said, I totally reiterate, take photos of everything. I did take photos of absolutely everything, and I still needed more because even 6 months later, I was asked to prove some aspects of what had happened. And 18 months later, there was another court case going on where they used some of the images from my mobile phone in a case where they were trying to decide whether it was floodwater coming up or floodwater coming down that caused the damage to somewhere else. So, you know, keep all those images and keep them well. And I've just put up behind me, the photo behind me is actually Lismore from yesterday afternoon. I was actually in the Gold Coast and I was had a need to fly around to check the engine. So that's Lismore. I think that looks like the river's back down to where it should be, but probably doesn't show well in that photo. But the damage that's around there is remarkable. And I don't know if you can see in the background, or you probably can't, but immense amounts of water still everywhere. So yes, get a group of friends around you, bounce the ideas off, and then the other thing I was going to say was don't forget to make time for yourself in all this. There'll be some of you will be business owners and feel the weight of responsibility. Some of you will be GP contractors and feel the weight of responsibility to your patients and to the practice. But please don't ever forget the weight and responsibility of your family as well. So that might mean taking time out, might mean having a weekend off, turning the phone off. It might mean taking a holiday. It might mean when some GP says, "Oh, can I help at all?" You say, "Well, actually, you know what? I'd really like a week off. If you can come and see my patient so I can just have a mental break, that'd be really good." So those are all the kinds of options.